Oh boy, I think we're good, eh? Okay, so if we have any tech problems, please let me know. Let me just turn this on. All right, tech problem number one of the night. It doesn't want to seem to turn on. So, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Scouching Live. We're going old school today. As any keen observers would notice, Delay J is not here tonight. I'm a little wound up. It's been a long time since I've done one of these by myself. But anyways, welcome to Scouching Live. I am Will, of course, your host. It is March the 3rd, 2025. Sorry, I was also running up the stairs to go get my headphones because when I hit the go live button, I looked around and realized I didn't have my headphones. So that was a boo-boo. But we're up and running today. We're going to have fun tonight. I hope we're all doing well. I do have to open the show with some solemn news, AJ not being here is a little solemn, but we'll survive. But me being a dum-dum, I realized that I planned a show for the trade deadline, and I will not be here for the trade deadline. I am actually the one weekend in the last 3 months where I am gone for the whole weekend is this coming weekend. So, unfortunately, there will not be AJ thrashing me at Age of Empires while we wait for the NHL trade deadline to roll in. It sucks. I really, really was hoping we could do that, but unfortunately, I have a commitment that I cannot avoid, so I apologize for that. But we'll do a wonderful recap show on Monday. We'll have a lot of fun. Maybe AJ will be there. We'll see. And of course, since I am not here this weekend, I am also out on Thursday. It's a bit of a long weekend thing. So for me, unfortunately, this probably will be the only show of the week, especially because I also have a lot of video to grind through. Scouching reports will start to trickle in towards the end of the month, probably this month. So look forward to those. Be super excited. Okay. I will also say, to make up for it, tonight will also be a really fun night because I built this whole stream from scratch, the whole window here. I mean, AJ did send me some of the assets, so the fancy stuff is all coming from him. But what I also did tonight, and we're going to do this because it's been a while since we've done this. It's been years since we've done this. I am going to share whatever information you want with you guys. So look at this. I assume you can still hear my audio, but this is going to be something that we can throw to at any given point tonight. So on the left, obviously, you'll see some track data that I have and some text analysis of some of that data on some of the players in the draft. Obviously, not everyone's a great sample, but we can have a look regardless. And on the right, you're going to see basically the tracker. Partner level subscribers get access to this live as it changes over the course of the year. And complete level subscribers on the left get access to see my track data as it comes in over the course of the season. So if you're interested in that, check out scouching.ca, where a subscription will get you access to some or all of this information based on your budget. So thank you very much in advance for checking it out, and it helps us out a lot. With that out of the way, let's get into it. So tonight we're going to just do a full Q&A. It's going to be a lot of fun. You can feel free to fire away at anything that you would like, trade deadline wise, NHL. I'm going to get out ahead of it. I'm going to shout out my boy, Yasserbek Rustamkhonov. His under-18 tournament for Uzbekistan is off to a ripping start, and it is looking like they're going to win the thing. I don't want to, knock on wood. I don't want to get too ahead of it, but they've won each of their 3 games to this point by quite a wide margin. I watched a little bit of their game against Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan has a guy on their team who I believe has points on all but one of their goals this season, which is pretty funny. But Yasserbek Rustamkhonov is leading the tournament in scoring with 16 points in 3 games. And I watched a little bit of that game against Turkmenistan this morning, and he absolutely ripped some goals by the Turkmen goaltender. So good times had by all. And Thailand is actually in that tournament, and the last day of the tournament is probably a game you won't want to miss of Thailand playing Uzbekistan. And I would imagine those two teams, it's a rematch of the Asia Oceania Cup from last year. That was one of the most fun, unexpected hockey games I've watched all year. The commentator on the Thai broadcast that you can watch on YouTube, you can find it if you Google it, is amazing. The hype level is off the charts. It's great. The crowds showed up for the Thai team, man. The screaming and the wailing and it's great. It's really, really excellent. So I highly recommend you go check out some of that tournament, at least in a couple of days when Uzbekistan plays Thailand, which might be for all the marbles. And it could be a lot of fun. I mean, it was a lot of fun watching that today, but good for my boy Yasserbek Rustamkhonov. You can definitely tell watching that. It's like there's one kid here who plays in the Czech Republic for an under 20 team at the age of 17. That's the guy. You know, it doesn't take very long to pick it out, so you get to go watch my boy Yasserbek Rustamkhonov for free as well. So check it out if you want. I mean, I totally get it if you don't. Stephen Ellis is probably the only other person watching those that is not Thai or Uzbek or Turkmen or whatever. But that's neither here nor there. Okay, so let's get into this. Let's do this. Let's start digging into some questions. I'm gonna go through the ones we got in advance. There were a couple that we got in advance from people, so I am gonna go get those. First one comes from Austin on Blue Sky. It's going to be a Jason Musa follow-up. Musa, I don't remember. Not enough to get drafted, in my opinion, but have him noted as a D+1 guy. So Austin, if you're watching or listening, I did go and watch him. He's a guy who, when I watched him, his link was purple, which to me means I've seen him before, and I liked him enough to Google him. And I think that he is one of those really small, agile, dynamic scoring forwards who, gosh darn it, he tries. And I like him. A guy who I think could be a good college player. But I didn't really, like, in terms of an NHL draft pick, I don't think he's quite that, like, 5'6", 5'7", like Nathan Gerby, Tyler Ennis, Trey Fix-Wolanski style, really tiny guy who could make it work. But that doesn't mean it's impossible, obviously, but I do think he could be a good college guy. The other question he threw in there, you've mentioned that you've leaned a bit more on the eye test than data this year. What are examples? Players who have good data but bad eye test, or bad data but you like what you see? So, yeah, there's a lot of examples of this. I would also kind of rephrase the way that question is worded a little bit. I wouldn't say I'm relying more on the eye test, but I think about my data less as an actual evaluation tool, if that makes sense. So, I obviously, the data backs up what I'm seeing and it kind of goes together it like a puzzle. But I would say that, it's just that there are some cases where the data probably doesn't quite line up with the results. Like Jackson Smith is a really good example. So let's flip over to this. So, yeah, let's take a look at Jackson Smith here. Where is it? This is a new format. I'm a little bit tripped up here. There, Jackson Smith. So you'll note not a lot of really, really good stuff here, possession-wise especially. So up here is the possession section. Tons and tons and tons of passing out there, and he's completing a decent amount of them, but not necessarily, driving a tremendous amount of play or possession. And that kind of lines up where I go, well, when I watch him, it's not really his fault, right? A guy who passes the puck almost a quarter of the time and a guy who misses on his passes up the ice about half the time, which to me, again, I don't think is really his fault 100% of the time. So Jackson Smith is an example right off the top that I can think of that might be one that, we think again about. I'm trying to think of other ones. I mean, here's one that a lot of people seem to be in a tiff about. I mean, this one like Kayshawn Aitchison, it lines up, right? So pretty much across the board, there isn't much for Aitchison that really shines. So like this to me is a problem that I'll highlight here. A guy who does 70% of his transitions up the ice are incomplete. And coming to his way, almost 60% of them, they maintain control. And to me, that's a bit problematic. Well, it is. For a defenseman, it's extremely problematic. But in terms of guys who, the data and sort of everything doesn't line up, we can take a look here. Let me just pull up maybe another example. Who drives really good results but I don't buy it, or who drives bad results and I buy it? Anton Frondel's a good one. I mean, I've tried. You'll note the number of teams that I've tracked him on. I think, actually, there's just two, just Your Garden and the U18. So there you go. No J20 data in here. It's not that amazing, especially when you compare it to Victor Eklund's data. I mean, Victor Eklund in a lot of ways is just out of control in a lot of areas here. His possession numbers are great. He's generating a lot of offense and a lot of opportunity for others. Not shooting a ton, but not generally wasting too many opportunities. I would like him to maybe do a bit better with his shot selection, but he's doing the stuff. I mean, tons of off the puck play here, hits and offensive zone turnovers generated, I should say. But Frondel is just a little bit more limited. The defensive numbers also look really good for him, but the transition numbers aren't really in his favor. He's not quite as involved going either direction, but he's got a bit better shot selection in terms of getting to scoring areas and everything, but his playmaking isn't as good. And I think, but I think this captures sort of the aggregate of his whole season rather than, I think, the growth that he's had since getting better with regards to his injury and coming back from injury and all of those things. So I think Frondel's a good example of a player who I think shows a lot better than the data I have on him so far. And again, you might notice that some of these guys, it's not like an immensely huge sample size, but I mean, I have over 150 guys in the database so far this year, and so now is when I start really honing in on the guys I want to focus on. I mean, Alexander Zhuravsky might be a good example of the opposite. So Zhuravsky on paper is one of the best players in terms of raw data that I've seen this season. But I mean, with him, I think it doesn't take very long watching him to go, one, the quality of competition is not very high for him where he is in the Eastern Conference in Russia. But also, he is not the best skater. Like, he's not particularly quick. He is a player who is just 100% confidence, 100%, I'm going to try stuff. And I think his teammates know that. He plays with a really, really fun line mate. I forget his name. Danila Porokin or something? Prokhorov? Anyway, one of his line mates, I think he wears number 9 if you wanted to go check him out. He's a guy who I think does a lot of work with him and helps him out quite a bit. I think Zhuravsky's a bit of a long shot, but I mean, in terms of creativity and passing ability, it's really, really strong with him. But I don't think I buy it. And I think a lot of that has to do with quality of competition. So hopefully that points in the right direction of what kind of is out there. Blues Gator asked about Michael Misa comparing to Macklin Celebrini style and skill wise. So let's take a look here at maybe we compare them too, right? So we got, oh no, we don't have data on Celebrini. Well, we'll skip that, right? Celebrini was last year. He was last year, but we'll pull up Michael Misa's data here. He was outstanding. He is outstanding. I mean, there is literally the only thing I think you can poke a hole in data-wise for him is his hits. You know, he doesn't really throw the body all that much, but he generates a tremendous amount of turnovers in the offensive zone for his team. He's unbelievable on offensive transitions, and he does it pretty much almost as perfectly a balanced fashion as you could possibly get. About 30% passing, about a quarter of the time carrying, and 45-ish% on pass receptions, which, I mean, that's a really, really good balance. A lot of guys just sort of, maybe he's a little bit passive and off puck in general as a player, but I don't think it really matters. I mean, his shot data is among the best I've ever seen. His playmaking data is also extremely strong. So to compare him to Celebrini, I mean, Celebrini was definitely also a very good play driver, a very good shooter. I don't think his shot selection was as sort of ridiculous, but he was a very, very impressive offensive transition player. I think his defensive numbers were a little bit worse because, he did generate a lot of those turnovers. He was definitely there as well. In terms of style, I think Celebrini is a more flashy finisher. I think he sees higher level plays than Misa does, but that's not a knock on Misa. I think Misa sees the right play a lot of the time. Like Celebrini might see that next level of play, but Misa definitely just sees the game in front of him and goes, this will work, and this will put the puck in the right spots, and we'll get there. And we'll maybe get a scoring chance out of it. And generally they do. So it's like, I think one has a little more flash in Celebrini. I think Celebrini is a little bit more active off the puck as well. But Misa is just brilliant and moves the puck really, really well. Works off of his line mates really well as well. I mean, Celebrini did too, but I think that's a real hallmark of Misa's game. So there's a lot. I think they're kind of same, but different. And yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thought. And another one we got on Blue Sky, how low is too low for Cameron Schmidt? Can't see 20 prospects better than him in this class. So I think on the surface, I would agree. Right now, I've got Schmidt in the mid-teens. For me, I mean, he's a guy who some of his games are really, really good, and some of his games are not very good. I don't think he's much of a real sort of play driver for his team as much. He's very much a individual sort of give me the puck and I'll do it type player, but I mean, he's really good at it. I mean, I think the question is going to be like, what is the likelihood that you think he'll be whatever it is you think he could be, right? Like, I think that he does take up just very, very little amounts of space on the ice. I think he has an issue with pursuit defense and falling behind a little bit and just not being much of a factor defensively right now. And also, I mean, yeah, the shot selection is a bit of an issue. That's a thing that people talk about all the time. But I think that that's something that will maybe come with time. But to me, it's just a matter of like risk, right? At the end of the day, Cameron Schmidt is a winger. He's 5'7", 5'8". He's rambunctious. He's physical. He's aggressive. He's a great shooter. I think he's a better playmaker than is led on. But at the end of the day, he's not a guy who touches the puck as much as you might think or would like. He's a not super effective defensive player. He's been caved in possession-wise every game, but I don't think that's really his fault. I don't put that solely at his feet. So I think he's going to be a guy that is going to be one of the guys where he's probably one of the best bets you could take, right, in the draft, right? I don't think he'll go top 20, top 25. But if it's like 30... or if it's the early second round, is there going to be better players on the board? I mean, for me, maybe, but like there's only a couple that I would have probably higher than him that might be available there, like Michael Sverchek. Maybe Braden Coots is a guy that's a day 2 pick. Bill Zonin, maybe a day 2 pick. But I have Zonin and Schmidt right next door to each other. So I think it happens pretty quick that he could very well be the best player available, but it's a matter of if an NHL team trusts him and thinks that they'll get a pro out of him. Because if they don't have that certainty level with that player, then they'll be happy to pick someone they're more comfortable with. So we'll see. Okay, on Twitter, I don't think we got any, so that's okay. We did get one question from a viewer privately, someone who I'm quite close with. Yeah, so what the question was, let me just pull it up here. Actually, it was on my phone. Okay. So we got a couple of questions here. What separates James Haggins from Colin Potter aside from preseason ranking? So that's a good one right off the top. So we can take a look at Haggins on one side and Potter on the other. So here's what we can do step one, right? Just compare the two. James Haggins points, Colin Potter points. And so that basically just compares all these metrics. Who is better at who by, and just go, James Haggin wins. It's not, this is my mental illness, guys. This is how it is. But I built this to go, yeah, you know what? Let's just see who comes out on top. For me, I think with Haggins and Potter, I think the thing between the two of them, Haggins is definitely a better distributor of the puck. I think he sees the ice a little bit better and plays at, he doesn't go as hard as he can all the time. I think Colin Potter does that a little bit too much. But I do think Potter has better pace in his game. I think he has more of I think Haggins is sort of catching up in terms of compete level and intensity level. I mean, Potter plays with significantly worse line mates. That's the other thing to keep in mind too. But I mean, in a lot of metrics, it's a lot closer than you might think. Haggins is definitely more involved offensively. Potter, but the thing about Potter to keep in mind is this data, right? So this here is shot attempts created percentage. So this is the percentage of the team's shots that he is either taking or setting up for a line mate. And Colin Potter is almost at 55%, and James Haggins is just over 40%, and Haggins plays with better line mates. So to me, that indicates that Potter, while he doesn't generate as much offense purely while he's on the ice, the Arizona State around him does not generate as much offense as Haggins does around him. So to me, I think that they're much more comparable than you might think, which is why I have Potter quite high. And I mean, they're both kind of not the biggest guys in the world, but they're really dynamic and skilled and fast. And I think they're both sort of gaining that physical side of their game. So I don't know. I think they're pretty comparable. But I do go with Haggins because I think he does work off of other players a little bit better. And I think he times his plays a little bit better, whereas Cullen Potter is sort of like go, get the peg in the hole as fast as possible. There was a part 2 to this question, and then we'll move to the chat questions here. And this was interesting, actually, because I actually looked into this before the show started and took some time. It's why I was a little bit late. I lost track of time, honestly. Is there anything to learn from players like Fabian Lysell and Brad Lambert that have a lot of pace and transition value, but are having a hard time progressing into the NHL because they lack scoring, defense, and playing off teammates? So, I'll tell you something. I looked into this data-wise. So one thing I noted, the Manitoba Moose at even strength, the leader in primary assists at even strength is Brad Lambert. His rate of scoring primary assists on his team is 50% higher than Matt Lewiski, who is number 2, and Dominic Toninato as well is number 2 on that team. Lambert cannot score a goal to save his life. His goal scoring rate is very, very low, but his shot percentage is also unbelievably low. He is not the highest guy on the team in terms of generating scoring chances for himself, but he's also, relative to his scoring rate, like extraordinarily low. So I feel like there's some regression there in his game at even strength in terms of scoring. I actually went and watched a game by game of his before the show. I am not worried at all. I think he is just doing fine. I think when you look at the numbers, especially at even strength, I think there's a lot of positives to take away. So I think it's a matter of like, there's no role in the NHL that works for Lambert, and I think it's too easy to or it's too difficult to look at him and as an example of like, well, maybe we should rethink how we look at these players, right? Like in the game I did, they were playing Iowa, and he forechecked against a David Jiricek more than one time and came away with the puck or managed to generate a turnover in the offensive zone, which to me is trademark Brad Lambert, like a guy you look at and might underestimate in terms of physicality and intensity in his game, but then he generates a few turnovers in the offensive zone and tries to get something going for his line mates. So I think Brad Lambert's the type of player that can play with the best players, but is a player who, if he's paired with guys more down your lineup, he's not going to look as effective because he just doesn't get the results. So for me on Lambert, I think it's too early to say things. And Lysell, I mean, I'll grant you that Fabian Lysell is maybe, I mean, let's get something out of the way first, right? Like Fabian Lysell, I believe, is leading his team in scoring or very close to it. And I mean, he's played with better line mates recently, and I think that that's been a bit of a boost to his scoring. And I mean, I don't know. I watched his one NHL game, and I look at him, and I think AJ's right? It's like he's the player kind of Boston needs, right? I mean, why, if we're going to label guys like Lysell and Lambert with these concerns, but they are still productive, why would other guys get a look over them, right? Like, why would other guys who don't bring the things that these guys bring, why would that be why would that be something that you would skip over, right? Oh my God, I'm sorry. Elite Prospects, Google Chrome just blocked my ad blocker, and Elite Prospects without an ad blocker is bordering on unusable. So Lysell's not the leading scorer on the team. I misspoke. But, I mean, he is one of the leading scorers on the team. I don't know. At the end of the day, to answer the question more directly, I do think there is something to be said about the importance of, generating the opportunities for those transitional players to play in transition, right? Like the back checking and the causing of turnovers. But I think in both of their cases, Liesel and Lambert, they both do that pretty well. And when I watch a guy like Lambert, I don't see it as much with Liesel, but I see high-end playmaking out of Lambert for sure. And I see a guy who can finish, but he's just not finishing. Whereas with Liesel, I do think that is a bit of a concern. So, but to me, like Liesel, to me is a guy who, could he play third line on my team? Yeah, I would think so, right? He's antagonistic, he's physical, he's got skill, he's a hunter, and he can move the puck. And I think in the NHL, if you can move the puck, it unlocks a lot of things for you. And so I don't know. I mean, I think also like I just want to see these types of players given some rope and 30 games just to get them to, you know, if the league is too physical for them or too intense, I want to at least see it happen in front of me. Boston is in a much more favorable position to try that with Liesel because they're the Boston Bruins of 2025. But Winnipeg is definitely not. I think Winnipeg being one of the best teams in the league, you obviously don't want to just be playing around like that. But in any case, I think they're pretty darn. I think they're doing just fine, especially considering like seeing a guy like Brad Lambert and Fabian Liesel against their draft class at the AHL level. I think they belong in that group to say the least. Okay, let's get into some chat questions here because it is about time that we do that. Okay, let me just close some of these tabs here and move on with my life. All right. Yeah. So if you're unaware, obviously this is going to be a Q&A episode. We also have access to my data like this stuff. So if you have any questions, now's the time to ask because this is usually paywalled. So you're welcome. Okay. Nabil, what's going on? I think I recognize your name. Are you concerned with Carter Bear's significant point drop in the last few months, especially considering he's an older player in the class? Well, I mean, I did see him last week. And I mean, I can't lie, right? Like if I flip over to this, I buy that that the raw data for him is overall very fine across the board. But I think it's fine in a way that I look at him and I go, if you think he's going to be a top 6 elite NHL scoring winger, I'm not sure that's what he is. But if you think he's going to be a really dependable 200-foot presence who can throw the body, skate pretty well, he's got really good skill, and a lightning quick shot release, I mean, I think he might just be regressing back to maybe where he should be. Looking at his tracker here, he's on pace for, where is he? Carter Bear. He's on pace for a 90-point season, which is still really good. A lot of guys have regressed, right? Like for a long time, Porter Martone was on pace for 130 points, or Ben Kindle was on pace for 120 and whatever. Like only it really seems like Michael Misa really has kept up with the expectations that he had at the beginning of the year. Maybe Victor Eklund as well, contextually speaking. But at the end of the day, you know, I look at Carter Bear and I see a really projectable, physical guy to play in your middle six. And I think that's a good thing to land. So point production is kind of secondary anyway. And I mean, sustain, and it's also like, it's like, I don't know if there's a word for it, like mathematically speaking, but you know, if you're a 95 student from September until February, it's way easier to drop your grade from that point than it is to be like, you know, a 60 student and improve your grade to a 95, right? Like generally, if it'll regress back to sort of where you belong. And since there's so much more room when you're scoring that much to decline back to something more 90-point season-esque, then that's definitely something that is entirely possible, and I wouldn't say it's something to worry about. But I will say that the last few times I've seen Carter Bear, I kind of look at him and then I look at other guys in the draft and I kind of go, yeah, I could see myself maybe skipping him, but I think he's going to be a very, very, very useful player for an NHL team. Just maybe not in the full-time 200-foot play driving style manner, so to speak. What are some main components to look for in McQueen's debut back? Well, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a slow start either, but I mean, I would think that I mean, I'll be very curious about the physicality in his game just because he's got a back injury going on right now and it's not the best. And back injuries are, you know, prone to be aggravated. So I hope that he doesn't try to like bite off more than he can chew. I wonder, I mean, I don't know this for a fact, but it really, I don't know how healthy he is in Brandon's eyes. The Wheat Kings, that is, not a specific person named Brandon. We'll see. But I am looking for a bit of a better possession player than I remember from the beginning of the year. I think he was a little bit clunky with his hands and his feet, especially with the puck. Off the puck, he was definitely more physical than I remember last year, which is, a good thing. I mean, I'll just pull up the data. I mean, obviously, I haven't gotten very much on McQueen because he only played the first month of the year, and I don't generally just track a bunch of games in a row at one point in the season. But I did watch a couple of the other games he did play at the beginning of the year, and like nothing is really spectacular with McQueen overall, right? At least across these games that I did. So maybe I just picked the worst ones that he was involved in. But I'll be very curious to see the work rate out of McQueen's game. Is he sort of going full bore into physical interactions or any of that stuff? So I'm not sure. We'll see. But I'm not. We'll see. I am more than anything, I would say I'm curious of how it goes. I don't know what will happen, but I'm very curious of what will go on here. Have you heard the news for Survivor Season 50? And if so, what do you think? Yeah, I saw that they were doing this. Let me look it up here. It's a fan vote. I don't know if there was any news. But I mean, some of the twists that they're pushing, I mean, getting rid of a fire challenge is kind of interesting. I mean, I don't know how they'll work around it, but I'm curious. Survivor 50 voting. I will also say this season so far looks really, really cool. Okay, so yeah, you choose buff colors, sure. Oh yeah, rice or no rice. I would say no rice unless it's a long season, but I don't think they're doing that. Final Four fire making, lose it for sure. And vote reveal in LA or Fiji. LA. I think doing the live shows later on makes way, way, way more sense. So that's how I would have done it if I were to cast a ballot, which I definitely didn't just do. Oh, wow. Roger McQueen's supposed to come back tomorrow. That's good. I honestly have been so busy today with data tracking, and then I took 2 hours to get this stream set up because my audio setup did not work. So that was a pain, but a little behind on the news. Václav Nestrasil or Jakub Wozniak, and why? Oh, boy. I mean, I think Nestrasil is much more raw than Wozniak. I think Wozniak sort of feels more comfortable in the flow of the game, makes better slip passes through traffic. I think he makes more creative plays. I mean, Nestrasil is on my list for tomorrow or the day after, and I do really like him. I think Nestrasil is all the what if, right? Long-term thinking. He's a really, really fluid skater for a guy his size. He is physical. He brings a lot to the table that I think you need. But, I mean, you'll see. I mean, I've only done a couple of games of Nestrasil because he sort of hit my radar a little later on. He hasn't shot the puck once. Not a whole lot of slot passing. But a decently effective player in transition. And I think that a lot of that comes down to, he's a pretty good short-distance passer. But Wozniak, I think, sees things a little bit more reliably. And makes sort of plays a little bit quicker, if that makes a little bit of sense. But Nestrasil, I mean, there's a lot of potential there. I have Wozniak higher, I think. Let me double check that. Wozniak, where are you? So they're in the same tier, and they're very close, actually. They're like 2 apart here. So I have Yves Wozniak in my middle of the second, and so do I have the same. I have the same thing with Nestrasil. So I think Nestrasil is a more physical player, but I think Yves Wozniak is a more like reliable, comfortable player in terms of moving the puck, especially. But I am very curious about Nestrasil and what he's gonna be in a few years. Who's the Russian that will get picked in the late rounds that will get KHL games next year, and they'll look like they should have been gone in the first 3 rounds? Ivan Fomin. No, that's a joke. It's a very good question. I am very curious about Daniil Prokhorov, but he can't play in the KHL, I don't think, unless he goes to Dynamo Moscow, because he's with Dynamo St. Petersburg and they have a VHL team. Because I watched Prokhorov. I mean, I think David Phillips suggested him at the beginning of the season, and I watched him. And I watched him again a couple of weeks ago, and I saw a very intriguing player. Like, not in the same way that a Nestrasil is intriguing, but in a way that, like, he's one of those big, lanky guys with a ton of skill and really good finishing ability, but just hasn't quite put together the distribution game or the overall pace and intensity in his game that he could probably have. Not the best skater. Not the best skater. He's a little clunky. But at the end of the day, you still see some really, really impressive stuff out of him. So if he goes to like the VHL, I could see him having quite a successful year with a good summer of growth. Kurban Limatov could be a fun one, but I don't think he'd be very productive in the KHL next season. I don't know who it will be, because I don't really think there's a whole lot of Russians this year that are like, you run to the podium and draft them, and right away they'll be great KHL players. I just don't see. I mean, Limatov and Prokhorov are the two that I might see doing something at higher levels next year. I don't think it'll be Zhuravsky yet. Maybe, but I don't think so. Nikita Poltavchuk almost made the KHL team. He was playing a lot for them in the preseason, but I don't know if he projects to the KHL super well. I want him to be a thing, but I'm not sure he will. I mean, it would be nice to see Vladislav Ukhmalov go to the KHL, but I think that's a very long shot. I don't know. I don't think there is one this year, but I mean, clip that for a year from now, and there's some guy like ripping it up in the KHL. Who is your best player available late first or early second? Well, I mean, that's really hard to say because I don't know who's off the board yet. But I mean, for me, like, if a Ben Kindle is there in the late first round pick, like, that's a no brainer to me. Cullen Potter, if he's a late first round pick, that's a no brainer. Michael Sverchek, I love him. I might have him a little high, but I mean, the draft opens up so fast and he brings me joy, so I figure I'd put him high. And he'll probably be, at the very least, a second round pick, maybe beyond that. Eric Nilsson, I think, is a really good player with a lot of potential. Bill Zonin. I mean, I think if you do your homework and you draft a bunch of times between 25 and 45, you can do a lot of damage. You know, I'm looking at Philadelphia, for example, who just added more draft picks, and they could do a lot of damage in the draft. I think I would be very excited to be on Philadelphia's draft table this year and see who they could come up with, because gee whiz, you could do some damage. But I don't know. I think there are some good players available in that range. Thomas Bordeleau, I know he's not much of a prospect anymore. Do you have an opinion on why he's stuck in the AHL? So, I mean, my whole thing with Bordeleau from the day he was drafted and before was like, he is small, and I felt like he was a little bit absent from play unless it was in the offensive zone. Like, the skill level is undeniable. You can't argue with how much skill there is in his game, and creativity was really, really good, especially as a playmaker. But a guy like him, for me, I had him a little lower than where he was drafted because I looked at him and I went, well, I mean, is he going to crack the NHL, right? Like, is he going to be a day in, day out, 200-foot, which is what you kind of need in the NHL these days, playmaking guy who really drives good results? And I'm not totally sure that's the case. And after watching Cagnoni in the AHL, you kind of see a little bit of that with Bordeleau. Like, I think he's a really good AHL player, but the NHL is a lot more. It's a big step. And I think for him, not saying it's impossible, obviously, but that's been the sort of limitation that I've seen in his game. It's like if you're going to be a little bit smaller, it's why I look at guys when they're a little bit smaller, and it's like when you're 17, 18, I got to see you at least ripping up and down the ice and really overcoming your lack of sort of physical presence and just the geographic size on the ice that you take up. That's a hurdle to overcome, I think. Where can I find replays of under 20 Swedish tape for free? I don't think you can legally. I don't think you can. Sorry. How has Finn Harding improved his game since being traded? Love the content and keep the good work for us nerds. I can't tell you. I haven't seen a ton of Finn Harding. I did see he got himself drafted, signed to an ELC. My thing with Finn Harding, I remember from last year after watching him after he was drafted, I wasn't super familiar with him. I watched him. He was kind of fine to me. And when I watched Brampton this year and Harding's on the ice, actually, you mentioned he got traded. Let me just take a look here because, yeah, he is still with Brampton. Right. But, yeah, I don't know about, has he been traded? What happened there? Anyway, point is, yeah, it doesn't look like he was traded. Yeah, but like Finn Harding for me, he's always just kind of been like fine. I just a guy who, if you need him to be physical, sure, he can do it. If you need him to just be sort of tactical and precise and basic, he can do that. If you need him to play a little bit with the puck and push things offensively, sure, I guess he could do it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He's one of those guys where it's like, if he makes it, someone says he does, and good for him, right? Like, I don't know. When you watch the NHL, what team do you like to casually watch? That's a good question. I mean, LA is a big one. If I'm up that late, I mean, I often am, but if I catch a game, it's a good time for me. Seattle, I love to watch, even though they're not maybe having the best season in the world. Who else? I mean, I do like to watch the Edmonton Oilers. They're always entertaining. But honestly, I'll be honest, I don't get to watch a tremendous amount of the NHL anymore. Like, I'm so deep in tracking junior hockey, watching junior hockey, getting the data in there, and also playing Civ 7, that the NHL is just not the biggest priority. Like, if there are players specifically in the NHL that I want to check out, like young guys that are making their way in and seeing how they're playing, I'll do that. But in terms of actually sitting and watching a game, especially with how much I watch during the day, I just don't get to watch I don't want to watch a tremendous amount of NHL hockey at the end of the day. But LA's a big one. Seattle's a big one off the top of my head. Ottawa's always a good time. They're a roller coaster of emotions. There's a few. They're fun. I think what I love about this season's NHL is that I don't have a clue who's going to win it all. I have no idea who I would even like. I think if Edmonton gets themselves a goalie like John Gibson, now that AJ is not here, I can say that without reprimand. They might be a real problem, but we'll see. But that's what I love is you never know. It can be anyone, even you. Can you see Shane Van Sagi becoming a utility power forward who can play up and down? Yes. There's your answer. Yes, I can. A good power forward up and down your lineup. He can be physical. He's got a bit of skill. He's a pretty good skater for his size. Like, sure. Yeah. Do you think the prospect and NHL draft public community overvalues age, especially in regard to re-entry players? I mean, overvalues age in what direction? Like, are you saying they think older players are better than they actually are, or worse than they actually are? Because, I mean, re-entry guys is really tough because their specific situation does matter quite a bit. And trying to anticipate, like, if we were to have picked them a year ago, like, my whole thing is when I look at a re-entry player, I go, okay. And I do this with draft eligibles too, right? Like, if they're right on the cusp of being eligible for the previous year or eligible for the next year, I go, okay, if I saw this player and he was eligible last year and I drafted him where people have him ranked, 30th overall, 25th overall, 10th overall, and I tracked him this season as a draft pick and he was having the season that he's having, would I be happy drafting that player 5th overall, 10th overall, whatever it is? And if the answer to that is yes, then great. If the answer to that is no, then that makes me think, okay, maybe there's something to it. Maybe there's an issue here. And the opposite is true, right? So it's like I watch older players and I go, okay, like if I drafted this guy 2 years ago in the draft class that, 2 years ago would have been 2023. So the Connor Bedard draft class, right? If I'm looking at a guy, if I watch a Matthew Wood game, right? And then I go and watch I don't know, who's a +2 that might be worth taking a flyer on. Let's say Julius Sumpf in Moncton, right? I'm not directly comparing the two, but if I watch a Julius Sumpf game or watched him at the World Juniors, and watch Matthew Wood in college or at the World Juniors last year, and I go, okay, would I rather have Matt Wood or Julius Sumpf, or at the very worst, are they comparable? And if you have an honest conversation that they're comparable, one was a first-round pick and one was undrafted twice, right? So it's like, well, if you feel like at this point they're kind of comparable, then maybe we're talking about a guy that you draft because you kind of know what you're getting in that relative to what else is out there with other teams, right? Not saying that's a perfect strategy, but it is definitely something I kind of try to do. Like I always look at guys like I have Ludwig Johnson, right? If I drafted Ludwig Johnson, I think I drafted him in the 7th round if I were doing my team scouting thing. If I got him in the 7th round, I'd be thrilled with what he's doing in the National League this year. He has been the biggest surprise for me, and I loved that guy last year, but even him, he's not perfect, but he's been great. And if I look at him now and I'm going, okay, like I have him in my 3rd round, late 2nd. And so if I look at him and I go, well, if I had drafted him in the 2nd or 3rd round last year, maybe 3rd round, I'd be happy with where he's at right now, if he's the 3rd guy I draft. So that's kind of where he lands. Could he be a late 2nd round pick based on my thoughts of last year's class? Maybe. So it kind of depends. On sort of when I watch a player, I go, okay, if I had drafted you blah, how would I feel watching you do blah? And there's a lot of reentry guys. Like if I drafted James Haggins after Ivan Demidov last year, say he was number 3 on my board with Berkeley Catton, because Haggins is a little bit older for the draft class. Obviously, he would have been the youngest guy in the draft last year. Am I happy with how he's played this season relative to those players? Sure. Like, I think it's fair to say. Guys like Eklund might be a better example of that. McQueen, Zonin, Aitchison, Malcolm Spence, Logan Hensler, those guys, Fensagi, all would be better examples than Haggins. And so I always try to keep that in mind of like, well, if I knew that Roger McQueen was one of the youngest players in last year's draft, where would I have drafted him, and how would I feel about how he is as a +1, right? Like I think him and Jet Luchenko are like weeks apart in birthday. And to me, I look at Luchenko way more favorably than I look at Roger McQueen as they are now. So it's important to keep it in mind. But I don't know if it's like overvalued or undervalued, period, right? Yeah, so another Finn Harding question. I kind of answered that, and I don't really know. I've only seen him here and there, and he's never been a guy that's like jumped out at me as like a future NHLer, but I don't know. Any offensive defenseman with bad counting stats who feel like they could pop next year? Sean Barnhill. I think Sean Barnhill could be one. I love him. Like he doesn't score I think he had a hat trick. I think someone mentioned that on the show last week that he had a hat trick. Honestly, Simon Wang might be one. I actually did a game of his the other day, and I wouldn't say he was amazing, but you see kind of moments there where you're like, okay, like I see the appeal of this guy, and he has not really scored in the OHL yet. But I think next year he could take a step, especially maybe with some more ice time or more of a bigger role. But I mean, Sean Barnhill, I've seen him go end to end a few times. I've seen him dangle guys. I've seen him just, moving the puck is the biggest thing for him. Like if he can settle the play a little bit better, move pucks a little bit more reliably, and keep things sort of more structured and possession focused, and pick his spots a little bit better, I think he could be really, really good. But that's a pretty big what if, right? But I mean, then you see him go end to end and deke out three defenders and go to the net and try to dangle a goalie, and you're like, well, you don't see very many 6'5", 110-pound defensemen doing that. So that would probably be my answer. Rocky Langvart, I think, could take a big step as well. That's a guy I've really, like, every time I watched him. One day soon, we're going to have Mikael Holm on the show to talk about the Swedes this year, the Sweden class guys. Frölunda scout Mikael Holm, which I'm very proud to say is what he is. And yeah, he should be able to come onto the show and talk Sweden here and there, obviously within the confines of what he's allowed to talk about. But yeah, he wants to come on the show, and I think Langvart's a guy that I would want to talk to him about because we watched him together actually last week, and he was great. Like, if he was 2 inches taller, I feel like people would pay more attention, and we're going to do the thing again. 2 inches is like this much. I don't really care too much about that. I look at him and I go, he skates well enough, he's physical, he has skill, sometimes bites off a little more than he can chew, but I think there's a good defenseman there, and I think he could take a big step. When you're projecting a prospect as a first-line center, third-line driver, blah, 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 what are you projecting that onto? Do you always have a cup-level team in mind or just an average team? I mean, for me, it's like the team that I would probably build, right? Like, to me, a first-line center is that, like, you put them over the board. They can play penalty kill. They can play the power play. They have the ability to transition the puck. They have defensive ability. They can dish the puck in the offensive zone. They can do all of those. They can do the whole job, right? You know you can do that. They can do the whole job. And your middle six, I think, can be a little more flexible, maybe some more give and take, guys that lean a little more offensively. But I still want those competitive pace play driving guys, right? And, you know, fourth line, you can get your insulators, right? Like, I still look for similar traits in players, but I go, you know what? Like, look at if you have a guy who's maybe not the best puck mover and they're not transitioning the puck through the neutral zone super, super well, but you trust them defensively and you know they're going to play hard, they're going to fight and, well, not fight, but like compete. Then I think you could find roles for those guys. Like, it's basically like if it's a team that I am building, right? Like, if I say a guy is a guy that I don't see as like a bottom six even, like if I look at a guy and I'm like, I don't have him ranked because I don't really think there's much there, that doesn't mean that someone else might look at him and go, well, he could play third or fourth line on my team. It's just, for me, he's not the style of play that I would look for consciously, and sort of the structure that I would build around and the talents that I'm looking for to build my lineup with. So it's a subtle difference, you know what I mean? It's just sort of a matter of like how I see the game and like what I would build a roster around and like the priorities that I would have. And I think that differs from a lot of people's view of the game. Thoughts on Carl Onborn? I'm going to admit that's one of the few guys that I have not really seen, or tracked, I should say. I mean, he really strikes me as one of those guys where it's like I probably won't get around to him, but maybe I will, but I'm not totally, because every time I watch him I go, he's fine. I don't think he's like amazing. I think other guys on the Swedish junior team drive results and he sort of just gets the production off of that. And I feel like he's a good skater, not the most sort of active or mobile guy, or not mobile, sorry. Not the most like active, play driver, push pucks up the ice type player, but he's fine. But now that I've said that, he'll be in the NHL in 3 years playing 20 minutes a night, and that'll be it. But I'll take another look at him. He is a guy that I need to circle around on before the end of the year, obviously. Am I crazy for not seeing the power forward in Porter Martone? Seems like people are projecting that onto him because of his frame. I agree. I mean, let's take a look at him. So Martone is a guy who we're getting close to the end of his data sample here. He does have a decent amount of hits in his profile here. That's a pretty solid number of 10 per 60 minutes, which, is a decent chunk. He to me is more of an offensive guy. Like, I look at him and I go, this is a guy that I want on the ice in my top six, driving offense, playing with skill, and sort of ripping teams apart with his passing ability. Like, I think that's the best part of his game, generating offense for others and sort of, I mean, I do love seeing him toe drag into the middle of the ice and get sort of scoring chances from in the middle, something I think he's doing a lot more now than at the beginning of the year. And I mean, look, if I would love to see a more physical side to him, a little more edge to him, sure, but I think it's more to me he's like he's more of a captain material type of guy. And I think we had that impression of him when we interviewed him. Like it's not so much that he's like Brady Kachuk and he'll beat the crap out of you if you touch someone, but he more is just like he'll be there after every whistle. Like he'll get in the mix of these things. He will be a guy that you want to play with, and he'll throw a hit when he needs to. He'll do these things when he needs to, but that's not his brand. So I wouldn't brand him like a power forward, but I would brand him as a guy with a bit like a skilled playmaker with a bit of a physical edge to him. That may not be like, you know, I'm gonna put you through the boards 3 times a night type, but you know, just a guy who's like, I'm here. I'm going to get in the way. You come at me, it's going to be hard for you to get around me, and I'm going to pin you to the boards, blah, 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 which I think is also fine. If you had to pick 2 players out of your 4th tier for Montreal, who are the 3 to 4 players you'd pick and why? Well, in my 3rd and 4th tier, if I pick 2 of them, I mean, I'd say Cullen Potter. If I'm Montreal, Cullen Potter would be gross. And like, I don't know if I go defense if I'm Montreal. Like, you just added Carrier. He's still pretty young, and I like him. Potter and Kindle, I think, could be really fun Habs. You know, Kindle and Nick Suzuki could hang out. Cullen Potter and Cole Caulfield could hang out. I think that those... And I think Montreal kind of could use a little bit more oomph in their offense. Like, a little bit more screw you offense. And I think those 2 guys bring a little bit of that. Maybe a Bill Zonin in Montreal would be a lot of fun. I think he's a bit of a different brand. Like, I think Montreal fans would also really like Bill Zonin with the physicality in his game and the intensity level and the competitiveness. Like, he's so competitive a lot of the time, and I think he moves the puck better than I think people portray him. I think that's kind of a lot of where he gets his offense from. And I don't know. I've been always a big fan of Bill Zonin, and I think Montreal fans would like him too. So yeah, maybe those guys. Some combination of those. What are the traits the GMs will use as reasons not to draft Riker Lee? Probably something about his skating stride, maybe not being the best in the world. He doesn't really hit guys like that. I mean, I don't know. Like, again, I don't have a big sample on Riker Lee. He's kind of been late to the party here, but I mean, what I do have is quite good, especially offensively. But yeah, he's not the most physical guy. He's more of an off-puck forechecker. You know, he's not the most successful defensive player, and his shot selection hasn't been amazing in my sample size, but I don't really worry so much about that when I watch him play and see how he generates his offense. So, I don't know. I mean, he's not the biggest guy in the world, and usually smaller, skilled wingers, especially guys who he's an 06, not an 07. It might just be for teams, they look at other guys and go, yeah, we think there's more development room with these guys, or it's a center or a defenseman, and maybe there's more to chew on here. But for me, I look at him and I go, well, I mean, past a certain point in the draft, Riker Lee becomes one of the most exciting and creative and surgical offensive wingers that's out there. And he works hard. Like, this is a guy who will play hard. He might not win a whole lot of battles right now, but he'll muck it up in the neutral zone. He'll try to cause turnovers, and he'll muck it up in the offensive zone as well. What are we at here? Recently, you mentioned Wes Clark having a certain drafting identity with his tenure in Toronto. Curious what you think he'll look like with Pittsburgh. Yeah, I mean, I kind of half joke about it, because Toronto, I mean, you could, if you watched a lot of the players Toronto drafts, they draft a lot of good vibes guys and a lot of really smart playmakers or play stitchers with their passing, especially, right? I think Ben Danford's a bit of a departure from that, but Fraser Minton and Easton Cowan especially, like if they value those guys really, really highly, I think it comes from their positional awareness, spatial awareness, their ability to see the ice in all 3 zones and keep the puck under possession and find little creative ways to get through the opponent. I mean, I know for a fact that Toronto really values guys who perform well in their off-ice testing, which is more academic, I guess you could say. And so that would also factor into things. So in Pittsburgh, I would think you're going to get a lot of the same thing, right? Like Kyle Dubas is an academic guy, and Kyle Dubas likes to surround himself with academic thinking people who, you know, really dig into the why in decision making. Like, why would we do this over this player, right? Like, what's the evidence that we go with this guy, and what are they going to bring for us? So I think with Pittsburgh, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what they bring because I don't imagine that the scouting staff itself has shifted all that much, but you never know. I haven't looked. You might have to do that for me, maybe, and tell me. But for Pittsburgh, I think you might be able to see similar things. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to see Braden Coots or a Ben Kindle or, I don't know, I don't know, like Jake O'Brien, if he makes it all the way there, go to Pittsburgh. I mean, Pittsburgh will probably draft quite high, so you never know. But I do know, like, for a guy like Ben Kindle, I know there are teams out there that love that guy. And if a team like Toronto drafted a guy like Easton Cowan with Wes Clark running the show, and then Pittsburgh now has Kyle Dubas and Wes Clark, and they look at guys like Cowan really favorably, maybe a guy like Ben Kindle is where you go, whoa, why are you drafting him there? And then you sort of see what Kindle's capable of, and you kind of start to understand. I just watched a game of Milton Ystreen, and I feel like his two-way game is a little overhyped. He wasn't amazing. Good by the net, but not a first-round talent. I mean, yeah, I think Ystreen is a guy who kind of does remind me a little bit of what I thought about last year's Moto guy, which is Lucas Pedersen, who Anaheim, I think, picked. He is super skilled, and some of the stuff that he does, you go, whoa, that was impressive. But I agree. I think my big concern with him, and I think it's encapsulated in the data I have on him. Let me just pull him up here. I mean, how many guys do I have in here named Milton? Like, he drives an incredible amount of pucks up the ice with possession, and an incredible amount of pucks into the middle of the ice. But other than that, he's just not really bringing a whole lot otherwise, right? Offensive zone turnover numbers are pretty good, but elsewhere, not really. Defensive transition numbers are pretty good, but not super heavily involved. And that, to me, is a bit of an issue. He's a guy who I think has a lot of potential. Like, you see him once in a while just take off, put his head down, and just barrel up the ice and make some plays through opponents, through their feet and everything. But he's very much you only really see that when he has the puck on his stick type player. And so that to me is a bit troubling. I don't have him in my first round anymore either. He is, where is he here? Milton, where did you go? You're here. So yeah, he's in the middle of my second round. Like, I see Arvid Drott and Jakubis Wozniak and Eddie Genborg and Leo Sundqvist even now more favorably than him. Just because I think all of those guys bring a little bit more two-way energy to the game, especially like Genborg and maybe Ease Wozniak. So, and I think that that's maybe a little bit more worth betting on. Thanks for your video on Philip Machar. How would you rank Beck, Machar, and Kapanen in terms of who would you want to keep the most? That's a really hard one. Because they're all good players for different reasons, right? Like, I probably want to keep Machar. I probably want to keep Philip Machar. But then it comes down to Beck or Kapanen, and I think they're both quite similar. I might lean Beck, but I don't like it. I don't like that you made me say that, because I like Oliver Kapanen quite a bit, and I think he's come a long way in his game. But Beck is just really, really smart, really, really creative puck mover, and just sees the game really, really well on both sides of the puck. Not that Kapanen doesn't. I don't know. Flip a coin. There. I'd probably go with Machar for sure. Flip a coin between the other two, and I'm happy with whoever I get. Who are your 5th to 10th ranked defensemen in the class? I'll show you. So I've got Schaefer, Smith, Mertka, Fiddler, and Hensler in my top 5. Then I've got Boumedienne, Reed, Thomas Galvis, interestingly enough, Quinn Beauchene, and then Anthony Alain Samake. So that's an interesting group that I didn't even realize I had. Barnhill, I say, Barnhill, Wang, and Limatov, and Rayo Mullen, I'd say, are honorable mentions on that. And then it kind of drops off on my list here. Skvortsov and all the other guys. So, yeah, those would be
I really like all of those guys. Boumedienne is just all skating ability, and you never know. I don't know what he is, but you're going to get a really mobile skater that I think flashes some really good stuff. Cam Reed, kind of similar, but I just don't see as much in the defensive side of the game as I do with Boumedienne. Galvis, just dynamic and skilled and creative and fun to watch, and I think he's had a really good year. Beauchene, I have all the time in the world to put Beauchene lower on my list, but I've really liked him this year. Started slow production-wise, but I've seen some really high-end plays out of him offensively. Really smart positional defender as well. He's just a little small. He plays a game that's bigger than he is, and that's probably a doubt, but I like him. And Alain Samaké is another mystery box. I see some really incredible body fakes and creativity out of him that I just love to watch. He gets around really well, but he just hasn't quite put it together consistently in the USHL in terms of moving the puck and sort of maintaining possession of the puck and really quarterbacking play for his team. He gets filled in a little bit defensively, but there are signs there. There's glimpses there, especially for a guy who's one of the youngest players in the draft and a USHL rookie. I think there's a lot of runway to play around with Alain Samaké. Curious of your thoughts on Carbonneau versus Jurovsky. What puts Carbonneau far ahead for you? Well, Carbonneau is... Jurovsky's not the most active off-puck guy either, just like Carbonneau isn't really. I think Carbonneau is faster. Carbonneau is a better puck protector. Jurovsky's the type of guy where he won't widen his base and try to keep the puck away from defenders. He'll just try to dangle through you or stop up, spin around, and throw a backhand pass into the slot. Whereas Carbonneau kind of gets a little bit wider. He's a little beefier and resists pressure a little better, and will wrap his stick around his opponent or just find ways to thread pucks into the middle of the ice. Analytically speaking, though, they are kind of similar in terms of their inside-driven playmaking, but not always a tremendous amount of success, especially for Carbonneau, and I'd say to his detriment. Look, for me, Justin Carbonneau, the more I watch him, the more I go, God, if this were a 3-on-3 league or if it was just a 1-on-1 shootout competition, he would be lights out. But I find he's a guy who there isn't a whole lot of purpose behind a lot of what he does, but he's doing a lot of the things that register good data offensively in the offensive zone. I don't know. And I could see a guy like Carbonneau maybe being a guy that goes later than people think. And I feel like he's a pretty high upside but real low floor guy. And the same thing for Jurovsky, honestly, but I think Jurovsky is a lot more doubtful than Carbonneau. Okay. Is Artem Schlane worth an NHL entry-level contract? Artem Schlane is not a name I've thought about in years. I forgot he was still in university. But, I've always liked him. And I think that, boy, he's at his third school. That's crazy. But I think he's had a good enough NCAA career that you give him a go, right? You have nothing really to lose. I haven't seen a ton of him with Arizona State. I've only seen Cullen Potter. But Schlane is a guy that I, have liked over the years. Honestly, though, I have not seen him in a very long time. But for a guy scoring like that, he's been a consistent scorer in the NCAA for 3 seasons now. I imagine he's probably one of the leading scorers at Arizona State, if not the leading scorer. Yeah, so he's third on the team in scoring, but first in points per game, probably. I don't know. Yeah, I don't see why not. See what he can do. I don't see the harm in that. There are probably worse players you could sign to an entry-level deal. Where would you rank draft year Jackson Smith with last year's defenseman, and do you think the decision-making is better than Dickinson's? Well, I don't think the decision-making is better than Dickinson's from what I can remember, but, I don't think it's that bad. I don't know. I think they're roughly comparable. I do think Smith is more, mobile and more, aggressive than Dickinson was, which I like, which is why I have Smith higher than I had Dickinson last year. Yeah, so I had Dickinson at 14 last year. And last year's defenseman. So last year's defenseman for me ranked in order was Buyam, Jiricek, Frey, Perek. Is that really what I did? Or they? Yeah, Frey and Perek are together, but like take it or leave it. Levshinov, Dickinson. Like, I would probably put Smith ahead of Levshinov and Dickinson, but not Perek, Frey, Jiricek, Buyam. I mean, I think there's a lot of parallels in a way with Adam Jiricek with Jackson Smith, but I think Smith is a little bit more physical and like punishing than Jiricek, who's a little more finesse driven and like mobility driven and stick driven. So I think there are parallels there, but I think Zeev Buyam is still the guy that I go with out of all of them. And I still love Alphonse Frey. You know, yeah, he doesn't score a tremendous amount, but I like the underlying numbers I've seen from him in a pretty difficult league in pro hockey in Finland and Sweden, and yeah. But I mean, Zane Perek has also been very, very good this season. So I probably would put Smith after Perek, but before Levshinov and Dickinson. What's your opinion of Bruno Osmanis, Teddy Mutrin, and Owen Griffin? Well, Owen Griffin I can start with because I literally just saw him last week play for not play for Oshawa, but I was watching Simon Wang. And Griffin was on the ice quite a bit with Wang. And I mean, Griffin is a guy who I think could score a lot in junior. Would I draft him? Probably not. Could I see him getting drafted by someone? Maybe. Like, he's very small in terms of like weight. Like, he looks very tiny out there. He kind of does get pushed around quite a bit, but he's really shifty on his skating, in his skating stride, like left and right on the rush and with the puck on his stick. He's really, really shifty and agile. And he's got some skill in his game too. Like, I think he could be a good offensive OHL player, and I'm not sure about the NHL. Because if he fills out, I don't know like what kind of agility he'll lose. But he's a fun player. He's a really fun player. I don't have him ranked, but maybe I don't know. I probably won't. There's a lot of other smaller guys that I like, but I could see him get drafted maybe towards the end of the draft if a team goes, well, you know, maybe. I don't know. Osmanis, I mean, definitely really skilled. Definitely in terms of just pure skill, getting around guys, powering through pressure. He does that pretty well. I've been a little underwhelmed with him, watching him with Björklöven. I think he's fine. Like a good, skilled guy. He's ranked for me, I think in my third round, something like that, like a third round pick. Because I've seen him do some really fun stuff, but he was overall in the games I've seen kind of quiet, but definitely in the offensive zone kind of came alive a lot more. I feel like he'll be drafted before I would take him. But, you know, I also do need to go back and watch more of him. It's been a while since I've seen Osmanis, to be honest. And Teddy Mutrin, I can't really give you a good breakdown of him. I haven't seen nearly as much of him as I have the other two. Mikkel Eriksson thoughts. Oh boy. I want to love him so bad. Like he's a fun player to watch. There's skill. He's not slow. He's not clunky. He gets around the ice well. You know, he's an admirable player. You watch him and you're like, yep, I can see why you are so good for Norway, and I see why you are in Sweden now, and maybe you're an SHL player, but I don't know. Like, I don't think he has enough to cross that NHL level player ability for a player like him. Do I think he's going to be on Norway's national team for a long time? Sure. Do I think he's going to be in Sweden for a long time? It's entirely possible. Do I think he's going to be a great North American player? I'm not totally sure about that either. It's kind of like similar to Owen Griffin, where it's like you watch him and you're like, yep, you're moving the needle at this level. You are more skilled than a lot of your competition. You are faster than a lot of your competition, but is it going to be enough? You know, how are you under pressure? That's when things kind of fall apart a little bit for me with Eriksson, right? Like, he's aggressive, but not enough, I don't think. And he's skilled, but I'm not sure it's enough. And the bar for a player like him is pretty high, and I'm just not sure he's there. But maybe, but not right away. What are your thoughts on Victor Klingsell? I've seen people have him ranked top 20. I also have seen people not have him ranked at all. What's your read on him? So he's a guy that I wanted to get to today, but my stupid audio issues withheld me from that. So he is on the list for tomorrow. Klingsell, I mean, there are players like him out there for me, right? Like, obviously, I haven't seen nearly enough of him to really trust the data. But my read on Klingsell is that he is a really good puck touch player. Like, he finds his way around the ice. Like, as long as he's not forced to push guys back on their heels and push the pace of play, I think he's definitely got the skill and the confidence to sort of make really high-end offensive zone plays. But I want to wait and see. I have a game of his in the SHL to do. I did a game of Viggo Nordlund in the SHL today as well. Klingsell just to me is like, again, it's similar to Eriksson, but I think he's better. I have Klingsell ranked as a watch list guy right now because I want to see him in the SHL. But it's like, is he gonna hit that bar for a bit of a smaller guy like that? Is that in his future? Is he gonna be a smaller skilled player in the NHL? I think the skill level's great, but the physical resilience and the ability to power through pressure and back check and play defensively, I think has been a bit lacking for Klingsell, and we'll see. But I'm not I don't know. I wouldn't put him top 20. I'll say that. I definitely wouldn't put him top 20. But should he go undrafted? I don't think so either. Like, as a mid-round pick, yeah, I could easily see it and being one of the more skilled guys. But I think there are other guys in Sweden that I've really, really grown to like more than him. Like Gustav Hillstrom, for example, or Michael Sverchek, or any of the Brinus boys, as I've liked to call them recently. Thoughts on Bowen Cranston? That's not a real name. I refuse to believe that that is a real name. It is a real name. Oh my God. Okay, so Bar Down is getting into under 14 scouting. Great, good, cool. I don't care. I think it is very, very weird to, like, Puck Preps obviously has a reason to go 2010, 2009s, those age groups, because we're a college preparatory kind of thing. It's like a college hockey, who's out there, for a college scholarship. Like, that's really the angle, the focus, right? It's not, this kid's so sick, he's going to rip up whatever. He's better than, it's like, I don't want to put too much expectations on him, but here's Nathan McKinnon. It's like, okay, like, the kid's 12. Like, let's chill out. I don't know. I just think that's a little bit much, personally. But, clicks are clicks. People care. I mean, his elite prospects page popped off. But I don't know. I have no thoughts at all on any 12-year-old, 13-year-old hockey player because they're children. Like children. What do you think is the ceiling of Emil Andre? When called up this season, he looks great in the top 4, but the Flyers seem extremely hesitant to call him up while developing Drysdale. I mean, I don't know. I'll have Greg Revac on the show, and he can yell at me about Emil Andre, because I've never been particularly taken with his game. I've seen a bit of him in the NHL this year. I think he could be a capable sort of even strength guy out there, maybe kill penalties, but second, third pair, like, maybe. But I personally would also be playing Jamie Drysdale right now, probably more than Emil Andre. The Hawks fall to 4 with Schaefer, Misa, and Haggins off the board. Who do they pick? Oh, God. Realistically, like a Porter Martone, I hope. If it's like an Anton Frondel, I would be a little bit doubtful of that. Like, it would be like drafting Levshinov. It's like, you're probably going to get a player there. Like, you're going to get something. But you probably will say no to better players, like more impactful players. And maybe Martone. I mean, I personally would have Victor Eklund highest of anybody. And I think Victor Eklund, I mean, Chicago, I'm trying to remember, do they draft Swedes like ever? I'll have to look. But it doesn't, like, when they use high draft picks, it's very not often that they draft oh my God. Elite prospects ads, man, they're starting to drive me nuts. I hate, and I refuse to pay for premium with the normal website in this condition. I'm refusing. Until there's a pretty good deal, then maybe, but I refuse. I'll suffer on principle.
That's what the world is all about in 2025. It's about suffering on principle. So they drafted Joel Svensson last year, Milton Oscarsson the year before, Nils Juntorp, who they traded. So they draft one Swede a year the last few years, and it's never high. So is this going to buck the trend? The trend seems to be that they draft a lot of North Americans early. So I would think that a Porter Martone is probably going to show up on that list. Maybe Jackson Smith. I don't think so. Reddy Murtka. I wouldn't do it. But if it's me, realistically speaking, if I'm Chicago, if they really don't want Victor Eklund, probably Porter Martone. Because I think him and Bedard on the same team with guys like Nazar. Yeah, I think that would be just fine. If asked to go on Survivor, would you accept? Sure. I mean, they probably would be making a mistake. But sure. I mean, the better half and I talk about it all the time. I mean, she's pretty adamant that she would never, ever, ever go on Survivor. But, I mean, I do have outdoorsman experience. I grew up going to summer camp every year. I think I went 7 or 8 years. Almost died going, well, didn't almost die. I'm being a little dramatic, but I got hypothermia going through a beaver dam at summer camp. That was fun. Well, no, it wasn't fun at the time, but kind of ha-ha funny now looking back on it. So, like, the basics out there, probably I would be okay. I think I'm also, like, when it comes to the basics early on, like shelter building and getting organized, I have, like, no tolerance at all for screwing around. Like, there needs to be progress if I'm part of something very quickly, or else I get so, like, really frustrated. So if I see people, like, dawdling around being like, where do we put it? Like, what if we do this? What if I would lose my mind, and maybe I'd get voted out right away. But I mean, in terms of, like, doing tasks, you know, like getting wood and tending to the fire, and you know, I feel like I would invent little games, you know, like I don't know. I'm not on Survivor. I can't really tell you. I don't know. Like, if I was at camp, I'd be able to find little things and be like, let's play spot the fish or something. I don't know. First person to spot a blue fish wins a high five, you know? I don't know. Something like that. But I don't know. I would do it. If I was asked, I would do it. I don't think I'd win. I don't think I'd get voted out first. Because I also am pretty quiet in my personal life. Like, I can slink away in the shadows if I need to. And I guess I think relatively strategically about things. Like, I like strategy, and I try to figure these things out and gamify stuff. But the answer to your question is yes, I'm intrigued. But do people want to see that? Do people want to see my gut all over television and, you know, wandering around in the woods? And I don't know, maybe, but probably not. Thoughts on Braden Bowman? I mean, he is a guy. Braden Bowman is, I mean, I wouldn't have, like, if Artem Schlane doesn't get an entry-level deal and Braden Bowman does, then, you know, like, it's just because the team wanted him. You know, Bowman, I've seen a little bit of him with Guelph. I thought he was fine. Like, I thought he was, I didn't think an NHL player, but I thought he was fine. I don't know. I haven't seen a ton of Henderson this year, honestly. So maybe I'm missing a huge step forward in his game, but always struck me as just a perfectly fine junior hockey guy. And, you know, decently skilled. Never thought NHL player, though. Do you have any goalie data? No, not from me directly, but I do fetch goalie data from other sources that I can find. But I keep that private because it's not mine. The guys that perform really well in the data that I have are, like, Andrianov is pretty good, Medvedev. Some guys are not great, but it's forgivable. Like, Luve Harenstam is facing a ridiculous workload and saving quite a decent amount of chunks of pucks. Who's this guy?
Vityaz's junior hockey goalie is 20, Leonid Smirnov, but he's got great numbers as well in some areas. Gabriel Daigle is also facing a ridiculous workload and not doing amazingly well, but he's facing a tough workload. Daniel Salonen and Juha Samalniemi are a goaltending tandem in Finland who are both doing really well on paper. I mean, it's really tricky with goalies, you know, it's really, really tricky. But at the top end, I mean, the one thing I did note that no matter which way you cut it, Joshua Ravensbergen is not particularly amazing. The ones that you probably want to pay the most attention to me, are Andrianov and Medvedev. At least at the higher end. That's kind of where I would go. Ivankovic is kind of okay everywhere. But I'm also overdue for updating this, so I think overnight tonight I'll be updating this stuff. Maybe in the next couple of days. Maybe I'll do it while I'm away, because I won't be able to not do this the whole time I'm away. What prospect on an NHL team do you think could benefit from a fresh start? Well, let me take a look here. I need my master list of players. We'll sort by age. You know what? I mean, it came up in the Scouching server on Discord today, but did it? I don't remember. It came up on one of my Discord servers today that now that Topi Nemo is going to Sweden next year, that like I have liked Ronnie Hirvonen. Every time I see the Marlies, I like Ronnie Hirvonen, and I just feel like he's not the regular NHL team's cup of tea, but I think someone should give him a look. Like the speed and the skill and the physicality in his game is like, I would try him out in a bottom six and see what happens. Yeah, like that's the one that popped out to me right away. Maybe see if San Jose gives up on Daniil Gushchin. I don't know. It's hard. I mean, there's not a ton, because I don't think there's very many where I'm like, wow, this guy is not doing as well as I was hoping they would, and I can definitely look at the NHL team as a big reason why. And a lot of these guys, they have gotten fresh starts, like Jacob Perreault and Ozzy Weisblatt, and they've been relatively the same. Yeah, I don't know. There's not a whole lot. Maybe Jean-Luc Foudy, see what he could do on another team, but I don't know. Connor Bedard. There's your answer. Connor Bedard. I'm kidding. That's a joke. No. That's a joke. It's okay. They're still doing they're still doing 26 days for season 50 on Survivor, so no Rice. None of that. No. All right. Next. How does a team find a first-line center if they're allergic to picking in the top 5? Flames fan, by the way. Well, I mean, clearly, if they're allergic to picking in the top 5, they're doing just fine. I mean, first-line centers don't just grow on trees, but you don't have to draft them top 5, you know? But you're not going to get a guy when they're 17 and outside the top 5 where you're going, yeah, this guy could play first-line center for my team, no doubt, down the road. That just doesn't exist. So you're kind of hoping that like some guys like find that they get that opportunity and they do not look out of place doing it and they keep it, you know? Yeah, and I don't know. I don't think there's many candidates for that. I mean, I really like Gustav Hillstrom as a center in this draft. I really like Gustav Hillstrom, but I mean, him being a first-line center is a long way off. Same with Cole McKinney. But, like, good players, really good players at what they do. I don't know. You sign them. You sign them or you make it work with other guys. And also, this is the thing I always ask when situations and questions like this come up. What is a first line center? I mean, I kind of articulated it early in the show, but like, what is it? What's a first line center? A coach puts a guy out there the most minutes out of anybody on the team, and whatever happens, happens. And if your team is good, great. Does the number one center always have to be one of the best players in the league? Kinda, probably, but not always. Maybe you could find something that makes it work and you work around it. I don't know. Draft well enough and sign well enough and build around it and have a pretty good team top to bottom, I guess. Maybe you get something. I don't know. The inverse Toronto Maple Leafs. The trade Anderson guy. I don't know what that means, but if you're referencing Rasmus Anderson, I will never ever ever get on board with trading Rasmus Anderson. Is this the year we finally see Yegor Klimovich get drafted? No. Unfortunately, no. I mean, I just don't see it. I think he's a guy who, I mean, he's too good for the MHL. Like, I've watched him down there a few times. I like to, with the team scouting guys, I like to go back and watch them and see what they're doing. He's just too good for the MHL. And when he plays in the KHL, he's just not really getting much of a look. But when I have seen him in the KHL, he just, I mean, the physicality, like his ability to chip in defensively is just not really there. I think, I mean, where I would have drafted him was like, where was it? Let me see here. Yeah, like I would have taken Klimovich at 185th in 2023. Like, oh no, your 185th pick overall didn't work out, but you know what? He's still fun to watch. Do I think he could evolve into a good KHL guy in a few years? And am I glad that I have his rights indefinitely? Sure. Like I like him as a player. He's obviously too good for the level he's in now. Would I like to see him in like the VHL next year? Sure. I don't know. But yeah, when I watch him in the KHL, it kind of becomes apparent like, okay, maybe this is a little much for him right now. But the MHL is just, it's beneath him. It's beneath him, to say the least. Adam Banak thoughts. I want him to be a thing so bad. You and me both, my friend. Banak is fun. He is a player who, I mean, I'll pull up his data here. Adam Banak. I mean, I think he is a player who is a boom or bust. Like, he is all around very fine. Like, an offensive threat number of 20 is like bare minimum, I'd say, to be considered like a relatively good prospect offensively, unless there's some other thing coloring it otherwise. Like, he generates a lot of offense for his teammates. He's creating a lot of offense when he's on the ice, and but it's like, to me, the big thing with Banak is like, he is a player who, when he's going full tilt, I don't think he's going much faster than some of the bigger guys when they're not putting in full effort. Like, his skating stride is a little bit inefficient, but boy, is he ever quick and agile and skilled. Is it going to be enough? Like, he's a guy who I think doesn't really have escape speed with the puck on his stick. Like, he kind of just puts his head down and motors up the ice. And then tries to deke a guy out once and then just puts his head back down and motors up the ice. And I don't know. I love Adam Banak. I think he's a really fun player to watch. And I think he's a guy who probably will slip in the draft, and people will, they'll go, oh my God, this Holinka record-setting player is a third-round pick. Oh my goodness, what is happening? And at the end of the day, you'll look and go, yeah, he's a bit of a long shot. I don't think he's bad, but I think he's got a ways to go, I think. Did you watch much of Trevor Hoskin? What do you think his potential is? Oh my God, a Trevor Hoskin question. Well, I will say this. I did talk about him last year you can go back and watch my Calgary Flames draft recap because I brought him up in that video, and I believe I said something along the lines of, I watched him in the OJHL, and he was one of the most exciting guys for me to keep an eye on in the World Junior A Championship. He went to the World Junior A Championship and lit it up there too. And I did not think he was going to get drafted because a D+2 OJHL guy or whatever it was seemed like a bit of a silly idea. And then I saw him get drafted to Calgary with all those other bangers of draft picks that they took. And I went, oh, okay, so they like him too. Interesting. Okay. You know, I remember I was sitting at the draft with Joel Henderson, who, you know, comes and goes on the Calgary Flames, let's say. Shout out Joel Henderson, by the way. If you're in Ontario, check out his tour, Poor Nameless Boy. He's doing shows in rural Ontario as we speak. We went to the game in Kitchener Friday night last week and saw Kitchener play Sarnia. It was a lot of fun. He's a good dude, so go follow him and go to his shows if you can. They're fun. But anyway, I was sitting with him in Vegas watching the draft, and when Trevor Hoskin got drafted, he goes, "Who the hell is that?" And I went, "Oh, that's fun. That's from my neck of the woods. Like, he's a interesting player." Now, I don't think he's playing in the most difficult conference in the NCAA, but he is an exciting player. Like, he's an exciting, dynamic player, and I think I said, like, in the draft recap, like, if his name came up at the draft table and I was with Calgary and they were like, we liked him at the Junior A, he was dominant in the OJHL, you know, he's going to a school where he'll play a ton of minutes, why not? You know, let's give him a go. What's the worst that could happen? It's the 4th round or 5th round or whatever it was. And I'd go, you know what? And also, no matter what, there would have been a bunch of guys later in the draft that I could have gone, but I want these guys too, you know? The Niemanens and the Johnsons and the Herven or the Hoonenens and the Galvises of the world. Like, those guys went undrafted. So, like, knowing that now, yeah, sure, we can take Trevor Hoskin and look at other guys later. But yeah, I'm glad to see he's still carrying it all forward. He's a fun player to watch. Can't say I've seen a ton of Niagara University this year, but I like the Boints. The Boints are good. The Boints are bointing. What do you think the potential for Aidar Suniev is? Same as Coronado? Lisan Al Gaib himself. You know, the what is it? The knife, may thy knife chip and shatter, Lisan Al Gaib style. Aidar Suniev, man. God King himself. I love him. I mean, I don't know about, like, I think he's a different player than Coronado. I think he's less of a play driver and more of a scoring guy, like really good skill in the offensive zone. He's also a playmaker as well as a finisher. Like, a lot of his advanced metrics were better than Bradley Nadeau in his draft year, but Nadeau was a more involved transition player, and I think he flashed more like high-end skill. But Suniev got better results, and we'll see what happens. But I do really like Suniev. I have hopes. Not high hopes, but hopes. A good player, drafted in a good slot, and he's coming along really well. When I watch UMass, he does stick out in a good way. I like him. Could Cole Reshny be a top line center? I don't think so. I mean, me and Scott, when Scott Wheeler was on the show last week or whatever it was, like 2 weeks ago, I don't know, whatever, a while ago. Cole Reshny, like, we both kind of looked at him and went, we love this guy, but I don't know if it's going to work. Like, he's a guy who plays like a rambunctious animal, but is not very big, is not very fast, is not very agile, but he'll move heaven and earth to get the puck in scoring areas. He'll move heaven and earth to move play in the right direction and forecheck well. Like, what's my data on him look like? Yeah, like, looking at my package of data on Reshny, like, so many areas are really positive, but really absent in transition. Like, his involvement numbers are pretty low. Defensively, his numbers are pretty low outside the offensive zone, where his intelligence shines, and he is just a great offensive zone player. But in terms of like a top line center, I think that's a really, really lofty goal, and I don't know he'll get there. Would you rather have Cole Reshny or Ben Kindle? Ben Kindle. There. Has Brady Martin's playmaking improved since the start of the year? I mean, I will say the more I see Brady Martin, the more I see the appeal. I mean, I still think he's going to be a guy that gets drafted before I would do it. Like, he's in my late first round. I think he'll be an NHL player, down your lineup. But I look at him and I watch him play and I just go, yeah, like, if you really banged the table for him hard at 20, I guess he's in my ranking, I think he's in a tier that stretches up to 11. Like, if you really, really wanted him and you really wanted that stable, physical, pressure absorbing guy, sure. But I think there are more intriguing options that bring a little bit more high end upside than him. But in terms of like just getting a guy who someone tries to hit him or tries to strip the puck off of him or something, it's going to be really, really difficult to do so. And he's going to be facing those situations a lot because of how he plays, then sure. But with Martin, yeah, like the last game I did of him was the best one I've seen. And I do think his playmaking is pretty good. But my thing with him has always been just like he finds a way to get the job done no matter what. Like he'll find a way out of a situation. He goes, he plays hard. But I mean, I just wonder about the skill level and the pace of his game translating to like a high-end NHL job. And to me, that brings him down in value, but still, someone very easily could disagree with me and go, yeah, but we have a lot of scoring and we have a lot of offense and we need a little bit more of that like beef and stability in our lineup, then I guess, sure. What did you think of Owen Pickering his draft year, and what are your thoughts of him now? Owen Pickering, oh my goodness. Bringing out all the bangers. Where did I have him ranked? Owen Pickering was 2022. So I had Pickering, I think right around where he got drafted. Wow, he's playing with the Penguins a little bit here and there. Okay. Like, I did not think he'd be with the Penguins this early. I mean, he's not there full time, but like he was a guy for me where I'm like, I leave him in the dub for as long as I could, and then I put him in the AHL for a little while. Where was he for me? Korchinski. No, not Korchinski. Pickering. So I had Pickering at 29 that year. Yeah, and I remember him just being like really, really skilled and really good skating ability, like fluid on his edges, really covered ice well for his length and the skill level. But he wasn't really driving a whole lot of offensive zone results, and his defensive intensity was just not quite there. And I felt like with him, it's like you're going to need him to gain weight and not lose that mobility and, get more physical and bring a little bit more to like put himself in the situation where he plays his best hockey. And I think that takes a while. That will take time. Like in 2022, I personally we started the show talking about Brad Lambert and like, well, what about his limitations in this and this and this area? But like, I mean, based on what I've seen of Lambert and what I've seen here and there, granted a lot less of a guy like Pickering, like I still would, whatever faults you might think there are with Brad Lambert, I think he's further along, and I think that there's a more intriguing player there, at least right now. And that's probably the guy I would have gone with ahead of Pickering there. But yeah, I mean, he's an interesting long-term bet. I wouldn't be concerned about him at all. He's probably going to need more time to develop and become more NHL ready, because I don't think he's there yet. What USHL players do you like for the draft? Well, I'll show you. Riker Lee is the top one for me. Cole McKinney, if you consider that USHL, is right there. Ben Keevan is with McKinney. I'd say those two are on the same level. Flip a coin. Banak is probably pushing those guys, but I still probably would be more comfortable with McKinney or Keevan. Will Bell, I think, is a projectable player, but I think he has a ways to go. It's kind of Owen Pickering-like, but in a very different way. He's going to need time, but I think he could be good. Alain Samake, Nestrasil, Barnhill, and not Rayon Mullen. Those guys are all in a tier together. And then I've got Fondrick, Edison Engel I kind of like. Nicholas Sikora I've kind of liked as well. Luka Radivojevic and Jack Murtag I think are all sort of comparable with Will Horkoff in there as well, but he's a college player now. I mean, with Jack Murtag, I just haven't quite seen it. Like what a first round pick, I just haven't seen it with him. I just think he's more of a mid round, maybe power guy who, like I've seen a lot of them and tracked a lot of them, and I just am not. I haven't seen like consistently like a player where I'm going, yeah, this guy's right up at the top of the class with best NTDP player out there. Like I see a lot more out of a guy like McKinney. LJ Mooney even I think has gotten a lot better since coming back from injury. What do you think the biggest difference is in Easton Cowan and Denver Barkey's all-around game? Denver Barkey is faster, more intense, more of a jerk, and I think he plays and makes plays at a higher pace of play than Cowan does, but Cowan is a tactical... he's a tactical just genius. Really, really just sees the ice super, super well, times his passes really well, carefully marches the puck up the ice really well, just sees the game really well. And Barkey kind of pushes the game really well, which I love personally. I think that works out better in the NHL, but, Barkey isn't very big. But also I think Flyers fans are going to love him because he's a real pain in the butt and a real jerk. And I love him. You might say the Denver Barkey is kind of what the Canadian national team needed at the World Juniors this year, but that's neither here nor there. Do you envision James Haggins eventually as a number 1C on a Stanley Cup contending team? Maybe. But a really good second line offensive center that's like on your power play on the wing or something? Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, I think Haggins might even end up a first line winger. Like I really, really like Haggins off the boards, and his physicality is getting better and everything. Like I wouldn't be too worried if his game doesn't quite translate as a center in the NHL and he ends up a really, really good winger who can move the puck and make plays off the boards and then sort of go to the net off the puck and everything. I think that could be a really good thing for him. But really good player. But I think first line center, like for me, Michael Misa, I could easily see that, but not so much with the Haggins, but it's not impossible. And yes, I would agree. I think Barkey is a more creative playmaker than Cowan, but I think Cowan is more practical and good at it. Thoughts on Artyom Grushnikov? Oh my goodness. Real blast from the past. Has he been, I feel like he's been hurt most of the time I've ever wanted to pay attention to him. Yeah. So, Grushnikov always has struck me as, if he ever makes it, it'll be super limited in scope. I don't know. He skates well enough and is physical enough where I think he might get a cup of coffee, especially on a team like Calgary where there's a bit of malleability to their roster, but I don't know. I like Grushnikov, but yeah, I don't know. Might be a bit of a long shot. There were questions about Bedard's top speed in his draft year, but it feels like skating's proving to really be an issue at the NHL level. Do you think it'll sort itself out as he gets older? I don't know if his skating is an issue in the NHL. I can't say I've seen a tremendous amount of the Blackhawks this year, honestly. But I have seen a couple of games, and when I watch Connor Bedard, I don't look at him and go, "Uh-oh, what is happening with Connor Bedard?" Again, it's a really good jumping off point because I think it's really important. Again, I don't know, but I think I was the only person out there sort of looking at Bedard and going, "Unbelievably talented player." Unbelievably talented player. But, and I don't think, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, it's not the biggest deal in the world that I was the only person doing this, but with me, the bigger issues with Bedard, number one, were
he didn't have any kind of defensive responsibility with Regina, like at all. Like he was very passive in the data for him. Let me see if I can actually pull it up. I probably could now. I'm gonna have to. You're gonna have to bear with me while I find the sheet. But like, Bedard's defensive numbers in junior were not great, and I thought that in the NHL, like I thought there was a very high likelihood that he'd end up like a winger, like an extraordinarily good offensive winger. But I would try him at center first, right? And I don't know. I look at Bedard and I don't see. I don't see. Where is he? Yeah. So here, let me. Uh-oh. Oh, good. It's all busted. Nice. I broke it. Oh well. I can't. I don't have the time to pull it up right now. Clearly. But yeah, I mean Bedard. Yeah, I don't think the concern is really his scoring. But my thing with him when he was a draft eligible was, number one, he shoots from places you do not score in the NHL. I know his shot is unbelievable and elite and his release is wonderful, but the fact of the matter is, mathematically speaking, he was shooting the puck from the perimeter a lot, and he was carrying the puck himself a lot, and then getting in the offensive zone and shooting it from inside the faceoff circle a lot. And it looks like from his shot map that I'm looking at right now at 5-on-5, he's still kind of doing that. And in fact, he's out shooting the rate of expected goals that he has this season at 5-on-5. So to me, like it's why when I look at players at this age and at this level, I go, what is it that they bring and what is it that they do not? Because if you have this understanding that a guy like Connor Bedard is you look at him and you're like a generational talent. He's the best prospect we've seen in blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, but why? Right? Like, what is it? What I am always interested in, like, and not because I want to be like a jerk, but like, what holes can you poke in this player? Like, I think in hockey especially, it is so important to look at a player, and a really good one that everyone seems to be talking about is like legendary, and going, okay, but how can I beat this person? How can I get what are the weaknesses there? Because everybody has them, pretty much everybody. So it's like, what is it that you can sort of poke apart with this player that if I'm going into the draft, my whole thing is, if I'm drafting this player, how do I make them the best version of themselves they can be? If I'm not drafting this player and someone else is, and they come to town in November and I'm on an NHL team that's playing them, what can I poke holes in? What can I know that I can kind of take advantage of? And with Connor Bedard, those things were there. So in any case, okay, here it is. I found my data, by the way. If it'll load, that would be really great. It hasn't loaded fully. But anyway, the point is, good player, but I mean, I think once the surroundings improve, he's gonna take off. But the defensive zone stuff it's bad. Like he is a big net negative. Like, so here is his data that I tracked in 2022-23 that I don't think anybody has seen before. So I look at Bedard and I go, okay, like, the greatest prospect to ever live with 73 pass attempts per 60 minutes. Like, that was William Whitelaw level. I didn't even do this on purpose. William Whitelaw is 74 pass attempts per 60 minutes, and he was a third-round pick and also quite small. Luca Pinelli, more. There was more passing activity with Luca Pinelli. Braden Yeager had less. But Bedard at 73 for a forward, like Andrew Crystal's almost at 100. So Bedard just was not passing the puck as much as a lot of other guys. And I mean, but the medium range shooting was obviously spectacular. High percentage shots were not as good, and 55% of his shots were coming from the perimeter. And again, compare that to an Andrew Crystal. Like, he was getting better shot locations. He was passing the puck more. He was generating a comparable amount of his team's offense. I would argue he's not that much bigger than Bedard or smaller.
generating more shot assists. Obviously Bedard was relied upon much more heavily by his team, but Crystal was slightly more involved defensively on the rush, but was much better at causing those turnovers. Bedard was just a give me the puck and I'm going to go up the ice type player. So again, I'm just using Crystal as an example. But when I looked at Bedard, there were holes in his game that you could sort of poke, and that's important to remember. Not to put him down, but to answer your question, I don't think skating is the issue. I think it's a matter of understanding that there are flaws in his game that need to be worked on, but also his surroundings are not amazing. They're just not great. Okay. Thoughts on Ilya Potov? Rockstar, tons of fun. Love him to death. I don't know if he's an NHL player, but he could be a fun KHL player whenever he makes it. Dean Letourneau's underlying numbers look good, but his production is terrible. Are Bruins fans wrong to still have hopes for his ceiling? Well, I mean, it depends on what his ceiling is to you. I've seen Dean Letourneau this year with Boston University. I do not think it's as bad as people say it is with him. I still think that it was insane for him to go to college this fast. I think it was insane for him to not go to the USHL. I think it was insane to draft him in the first round. But I look at Letourneau and go, but you see bits and pieces there that kind of make sense. But, underlying numbers, fine. But again, I get underlying numbers on guys all the time. But at the end of the day, if the puck's not going in, it's problematic. And he gets his reps, right? He doesn't play a tremendous amount, but he gets his reps. I don't think it's as bad as people think. He was always going to be a guy that you let sit in college for a number of years and you see what you get at the other end. But I don't know. I did not at all have the certainty or peace of mind to look at him and go, that's a first round pick. I think that's still true. I think that's more evident now, but what can you do? I don't know, but I also think that people are now oh my God, look at the JFresh card for this guy. And I go, okay, let's chill out a little. There's no reason he should be a point per game guy in the NCAA yet. But, the whole argument that I make about guys like Letourneau, because I get told they are gonna be something. What about 5 years from now? And I go, okay, but what about Teddy Stiga 5 years from now, right? He's already, the gap between those two players is already quite large. So you're betting a round earlier that this guy is going to catch up to the other one. And the other one's going to not pull away more, right? And they'll have time to do it at Boston College. I don't think either of them are in any rush to leave school. But with Letourneau, I mean, we'll see what happens. I don't think it's as bad as people think, but I mean, yeah, I don't know. Again, last year he was a guy where it kind of felt gaslit about, based on what people were telling me. And I don't know, but it is what it is. It's just how she goes. Who's going to be the best player? William Eklund or Andrei Svechnikov? Maybe Eklund. I don't know. I love Svechnikov though. I don't know. One of my children is a lawyer. The other one is a doctor. Which one do I love the most and am most proud of? It's well, I mean, lawyers, I'd rather have a doctor than a lawyer, but I mean, how can you not be proud of them, right? I mean, the world needs both and they're both very well regarded. So I don't know, but probably Eklund because he's more fun. But Svechnikov is a bit of a beast and a bit of more of a physical sort of punisher guy with really good finishing ability. But Eklund, I think he elevates everybody else a little bit better than Svechnikov does. What do you think of Mads Kongsbach Kluvo and Drew Schock? Well, I mean, I saw Drew Schock at the Five Nations not too long ago. I mean, he's a guy who once in a while you'll see some offensive zone play where you go, whoa, okay, that was nice. But I just don't think it projects super well to higher levels. Kongsbach Kluvo, I think, is again a good Swedish guy. He's Danish, but in the Swedish league, I think he could be a good player over there. Similar to a Teddy Niederbach. Does he get drafted? Does he develop pretty well? Sure. Is he an NHL player? Not so sure. Thoughts on Connor Geeky? Good defense first insulator. From the day I saw him, I went, that guy is probably an NHL third line center. And I think I had him in the early 20s that year, if I'm not mistaken. I'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure it was 2022, and I had him in the early 20s. I had him at 26, but at the tail end of a tier that went up to 7. Right, I remember that year now, boy. But yeah, I mean, for Geeky, he always struck me as like, yep, he is okay with the puck on his stick. It's all very simple and effective, and he's a good defensive player who can get physical, and he's fine. You know, like carbon copy-ish of maybe I don't know. He's like a bigger Caleb Desnoyers. That's what I remember. He was like a beefier Caleb Desnoyers. You know, he can take a pass from his defenseman. He can set up a play in the offensive zone and drove good results there. Do I think he's a top 6 NHL player? I'm not so sure. But a good solid third guy? Yeah, totally, for sure. Is Ilya Protas a stud in the making? Well, Ilya Protas has been better than I thought he would be for sure. He's a guy that I liked last year in the USHL quite a bit. I undervalued him, but I also did not see this out of him. I mean, whenever I've seen Windsor this year, I think he gets a lot of good opportunities to produce. I think he's a good player. I'm willing to be patient, though. Like, obviously, a really, really good, good value so far. What is his name again? Protas. Yeah, like, went 75th, and I had him 71st. Right. So, yeah. And the guys I had him with on my list, like Ben Danford, AJ Spellacy, Jacob Battaglia, Ludwig Johnson, all of those guys I think are all having really good years. But Protas has been far and beyond what I expected. I don't know if he's like a steal or he's going to be destined for an elite outcome, but he could be a player. What have you thought of Jesse Nurmi in London this year? He is fine. He's fast. He goes, but I don't know. I've never really thought like NHL player there. Yeah, he's an 05 that's well under a point per game on one of the best teams in the CHL. And whenever I watch him, I go, yep, he catches your eye because of how fast he is. But at the end of the day, no points, and doesn't really drive play a whole lot, but you notice him. What team could you see move a prospect at the trade deadline that will be a mistake? Great question. Well, let's see. I'm just pulling up the first link I see here. I mean, is Elias Pettersson getting traded? No. Like, does Winnipeg trade Brad Lambert, right? Like for a Brock Nelson or something. I mean, Columbus has already traded David Jiricek. I don't think they'll, Minnesota trading like a Liam Ogren might be questionable if that happens. I don't think it's gonna. I don't know. Like, there's a billion players out there that, could be traded, and who knows? I think Barkey is, okay, we did that. How would you value a late first or second round pick in the previous or next year's draft? Previous years, let me take a look at my list from last year. I probably would go with a late first round pick last year, especially because there were guys like I had high, like Chernyshov and who else, like Frey and Stiga. Like, I've really liked those guys, and you could have them. This year, I mean, there's a lot of like, I don't know, who knows, guys, right? Like, maybe there are some guys that play down a lineup eventually, but it opens up real fast, and I like the guys where it's like, you know what? They're fun, exciting, skilled, offensive-leaning players. let's see what happens with them. Next year, though, I'm not touching that. I don't know. What I do know is there's a Ukrainian playing in the Norway League that I really like, defenseman, but I forget his name because I'm a bad person. Which centerman drops below the top 10 in this year's draft? Is it Frondell? No, Frondell's probably going first round or top 10. I mean, Colin Potter has been playing center all year. He won't go top 10, but that's not really a drop. Like Jake O'Brien maybe doesn't go top 10. Trying to see other center. I mean, maybe Roger McQueen is a guy that teams do the medical lookup on and they get spooked and go, yeah, maybe not. And then someone drafts him at 12 and goes, let's take the chance, because if he works out like people thought he could, then this is a steal. And if not, we tried. That might be one. You've mentioned a couple guys that are centers in junior that you see as wingers in the NHL. What in a draft-eligible centers game gives you the impression they're more likely to be a winger? On the defensive side of the puck, like their breakouts, like Will Smith is a great example, because with Will Smith, it was, God, he's skilled. Once the puck is in the neutral zone, he is very difficult to stop in junior hockey. But he was ineffective off the puck defensively, ineffective on defensive rushes, just not there. And when he wasn't very effective. Didn't really do the whole support defenseman thing. He was floating out at the blue line looking for passes, and I'm going, look, man, you're a winger. Like, this is a winger's job, and you're kind of doing that. Whereas I look at a guy like Brad Lambert, for example, who, when I watched him in Finland, I go, when you take him off the center job, he is way worse. Like, the speed of his game, the skill level, you need him swinging deep in the defensive zone. You need him supporting defensemen in open ice. You need him quickly breaking pucks out. You need him commanding the middle of the ice, and that's just what his job should be. And so for me, when I look at centers, like, I'll take some examples from this year. Like, I think Anton Frondell could be a really excellent third-line center, but I think he could be a first-line winger that complements some, like if Connor Bedard were a centerman with Anton Frondell on his wing, I think you could maybe get some interesting results out of that. That's just one example. I'm not saying specifically that's what should happen or is going to happen, but I don't know. It's just a thought. Because I feel like the board play and the physicality of his game, I think, lends itself a little bit better to being on the perimeter a little more and then driving inside off the puck and being more of that like complementary but physical presence. Who else? But like there are a lot of guys that I could easily see playing center in the NHL, right? Brady Martin, Cole McKinney, Gustav Hillstrom, Caleb Desnoyers, Eric Nilsson, Jake O'Brien. Like, I don't think any of those guys really lend themselves to the winger position. Braden Coots as well. Yeah. Does the lack of top-end defense prospects compared to last year's top 12 was 6-6 affect consensus view on the forwards? I'm not for this year. I'm not sure what that means, but if I read correctly, does the lack of forwards cause people to affect the way they see the forwards this year? The lack of defensemen at the top? I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's going to be teams at the top end who go, we want a defenseman. Like I fully believe that by the end of the year, we're going to see teams go, we have 8th overall. Maybe we take Logan Hensler. Maybe we have 5th overall. I don't know. Like Radim Mertka, he's big and he skates okay and he's got some skill. Like, what could he be in 5 years? Like, and if we don't draft him, we're probably not going to get a good defenseman until not this draft, right? Like, I don't know. Maybe there's that line of thought somewhere. It always happens, right? Teams look at centers and defensemen and go, we need to prioritize that, which is why on my team scouting thing, it's all late round wingers, because I'm going, well, they score. Like, I'd rather try to fill my roster out with fine centers who can get them the puck because they're good players. but neither here nor there. While you mentioned AJ Spellacy, I can see him being one of the best 4-line hair on fire guys in the NHL one day. That's true. It's entirely possible. He goes, man. He's just a goer. Does Boston trade the GOAT for a second? No, Boston's going to trade the GOAT for... Who are they going to trade the GOAT for? They're going to trade him to... I'm going to break AJ's heart here. They're going to trade him to... They're going to trade him to... They're going to trade him to the Nashville Predators for Luke Schenn. Boston Bruins are going to trade for Luke Schenn, and they're going to give up Fabian Lysell. That's what's going to happen. Just got into the stream. Do you think Colby Barlow would be on the table for a trade this week? Maybe. I mean, an NHL team probably wants him. And it depends on the player you're getting back. But, I mean, I've seen Oshawa quite a bit this year. I think Barlow is fine, but I don't know. If you think you can go for it and you have to pick between Lambert and Barlow, I know which way I'm going. I would probably go with Lambert. Like, I don't know. I know Lambert's production has taken a hit this year, but I watch him and I go, yep, I still see a lot of potential in this guy. I still think that, you know, I would be in his ear if I were Winnipeg a lot about keeping him motivated and, you know, keeping his mind healthy and going, you know what, keep plugging away. You know, if our team weren't the best team in the league right now, you probably would be playing a better role. You know, let's keep level-headed here and you know, get you to where we think you could be, because I think he has a huge amount of upside. On that note, I think we're going to call it a night. Guys, this was a lot of fun. Again, I don't think we're going to be doing another show this week because I'm away starting Thursday. And AJ probably will be back next week. But this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing this on my own. It was a little sketchy at the beginning. It's been a while since I've done that, you know, without my comfortable pillow in AJ Gidaro. So, but anyway, thank you very much. Again, if you want access to data like this, you can go to scouching.ca and check out our subscription options over there, where we have tons of options for any of your pricing points. You can also join our really, really fun Discord server, which is always a good time to be a part of. And you'll get access to our cool data tables and our my track data is also part of the website if you pay for the complete version. So thanks very much. This was a lot of fun. Be safe. Enjoy episode 2 of Survivor if you're a Survivor fan on Wednesday. I will be back. I think I'll be back in time to do a show Monday, but if not, we'll do a show Tuesday. We have a game tape coming at some point this week. This is a bit of a low effort week for us because AJ is busy starting a job and I am busy getting ready to go away for a few days and take a few days off, and I'm busy with data stuff. But in any case, thanks for coming out. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for all of your wonderful, wonderful questions. If you have any more, definitely hit me up on Blue Sky or Twitter or whatever. Whatever is most comfortable for you. Or just email me. My email is on the website as well. And thanks again. This was a lot of fun. It was nice to do this sort of one-on-one and, one-on whatever. But we'll see you in the next one.